His mother asks where you went to school before she asks your name a second time to make sure she heard it correctly. You are sitting in a dining room with a chandelier that's slightly too large for the room, at a table set with matching plates that were clearly bought for occasions like this one. Her name is Deborah. She has the practiced warmth of a woman who read a magazine article once about welcoming a son's girlfriend and has been performing the article ever since. You tell her you went to a state school. She says that's wonderful, in a tone that suggests she has already filed the information somewhere and moved on to the next question, which is what your father does for work. You tell her. She nods. She asks if your family has a lake house. You say no. She says that's all right, some families don't prioritize that, and the sentence sits in the air, doing quiet damage neither of you will acknowledge. This family has made it, locally. A house with a 3-car garage. A cabin on a lake 2 hours north that the whole family visits every July. $400,000 of net worth that took 2 generations to build, and that Deborah discusses the way other people discuss weather. Casually, but with an underlying awareness that the weather could change. You are evaluated at every dinner. Not cruelly, just thoroughly. Your job is assessed, your car is assessed, the way you fold your napkin is assessed. Nobody says the word assessment. They call it getting to know you. You call it getting to know you too, because you don't yet have language for the specific fatigue of being a stranger who is being quietly graded on a scale nobody will show you. You call Keisha after the dinner. You tell her about Deborah and the lake house question and the napkin folding. Keisha laughs so hard she has to put the phone down. She says rich people are exhausting. You say they're not that rich. She says, doesn't matter. Exhausting is exhausting at every income level. And you laugh because she's right. And because Keisha has never once asked where you went to school, or what your father does, or whether your family has a lake house. She just asked if you wanted extra garlic bread. That was the whole application process. You passed 12 years ago without knowing you were being evaluated at all, which turns out to be the only kind of evaluation that ever meant anything.
The Thai restaurant on Division Street, 8 tables, vinyl booths with tape on the seats, a television mounted in the corner playing an unidentifiable channel, warm lighting from cheap pendant lamps. The wobbling booth by the window. Pad see ew and green curry on the table. The check split evenly, automatically. No evaluation here, no scale, no filing cabinet of information being sorted. Just 2 women who have always known exactly who the other one is. The one relationship in her life that was never a test. Tier 2, $2 million. This time, it's a family business, a regional chain of hardware stores his grandfather started and his father expanded into 11 locations. $2 million in net worth, most of it tied up in real estate and inventory. All of it discussed at every holiday as though it's a 5th family member who requires check-ins. You quote. We expected to attend the company Christmas party, not invited. Expected. There's a difference, and you learn it the way you learn most things in this family, by watching someone else's face when you almost make the wrong choice. You almost don't attend. His sister, a woman named Patrice, mentions offhand that everyone attends, every year, no exceptions, in a tone that isn't a threat but functions like one. You smile in photos with employees you've never met. A man named Ron, who's worked at the Elm Street location for 19 years, tells you it's nice to finally meet you, as though you're a rumor that's been circulating and has finally materialized into a person. You shake his hand. You smile. The photo will hang in the break room by January. Nobody discusses where the money should go in front of you, which you understand, eventually, is itself a kind of message. The money has plans that predate you and will outlast conversations you're not invited into. You learn the business owns your weekends the way a landlord owns a building, not through affection, through structure. Every Saturday in December belongs to store visits and vendor dinners and a version of yourself that photographs well and says the right things to people whose names you're expected to remember by the second party. Thursday, Thai Place, Division Street. You tell Keisha about Ron from the Elm Street location. She says that's the loneliest kind of famous, well known to people who don't actually know you. You've never heard it phrased that way, and you think about it for the rest of the night. The specific loneliness of being recognized without being known, which is different from being a stranger, and somehow worse. Tier 3, $10 million. The mother-in-law's name is Constance, and she corrects your fork placement at Thanksgiving without breaking eye contact, the way someone corrects a typo they've seen so many times it no longer requires their full attention. You didn't know forks had an order. You do now. You will not forget it, because Constance has a way of making corrections feel like inheritances, permanent, slightly unwanted, yours to carry regardless. The family name means something in this city, not universally, specifically. The kind of specific where 3 people at any given dinner party will recognize it and adjust their posture slightly, and the other 12 won't recognize it at all, and Constance can tell the difference in the first 4 seconds of any introduction. You sign a prenup drafted by a lawyer named Whitfield who has never met you and structures the document as though he has. Specifies what happens to the property, the trust, the art collection, in language that assumes your marriage is a temporary arrangement being managed defensively from day one. You sign it in a conference room with a view of a river. Whitfield shakes your hand afterward, the way a man shakes hands when the transaction, not the relationship, is what he was hired to protect. Constance takes you shopping once early on for what she calls appropriate pieces. She means clothing that photographs correctly at the events you'll now attend. She has a specific idea of what your body should communicate in rooms full of people evaluating whether the family made a good decision. You wear the appropriate pieces. You smile the appropriate amount. You learn that old money doesn't announce itself. It corrects you quietly and waits to see if you absorb the lesson. You tell Keisha about the fork, about Whitfield, about the appropriate pieces. She says, so it's like finishing school, except the diploma is a marriage license. You laugh so hard you almost choke on your pad CU, and for a moment, in this booth, with this tape on the seats, and this wobble, and this woman who has never once corrected your fork placement, the appropriate pieces and the appropriate amount of smiling feel very far away. Tier 4, $40 million. The fortune is 3 years old, built on an app that solved a problem nobody knew they had until it was solved. There are no old rules here, which you assume will be a relief. It is not. Old rules, however uncomfortable, are at least rules. This family is inventing etiquette in real time, including who you are allowed to be, and nobody has agreed on the answer yet. His mother, a woman named Sherry, was a school teacher 4 years ago and now owns a jet share and doesn't fully know what to do with either fact. She oscillates between treating you like family and treating you like an acquisition the family made, sometimes within the same conversation. She asks your opinion on a chandelier and then, in the same breath, mentions that decisions like that ultimately rest with people who understand the brand, and you realize you are both invited to the table and unclear on whether you're allowed to speak at it. There is no prenup lawyer named Whitfield here. There's a general counsel named Dev who handles the family's business affairs and treats your marriage as one more asset class requiring documentation. He is polite, he is thorough, he has never once used the word love in any conversation you've had with him, which you notice and then decide not to mention, because mentioning it would require explaining why you expected otherwise. You attend a launch party for the second app. Champagne towers, a DJ who costs more than your first car. Sherry introduces you as my son's wife, she's wonderful, to 11 different people in 40 minutes, and each time the sentence is identical, rehearsed, a business card with a heartbeat. Thursday, Thai Place. You tell Keisha about Sherry and the chandelier and the jet share she doesn't know how to use yet. Keisha says, it sounds like everyone's improvising and nobody wants to admit it. You say, exactly. She says, at least our booth doesn't need brand approval. You both laugh, and the wobble in the booth feels, for the first time all week, like the only honest structural instability in your life. Tier 5, $150 million. There's a foundation. There's a wing named after a grandfather at a hospital you've never had reason to visit. There's a family rule, stated to you plainly during the engagement by a family office representative, that spouses receive provision, not equity. You ask what the difference is. She explains it slowly, the way someone explains something they've explained many times to many spouses who all asked the same question with the same hopeful confusion. Provision means the house, the cars, the school tuition for children who don't exist yet, the credit cards, the allowance that adjusts based on family board decisions you will never attend. Equity means ownership. Provision means access. You will have access to almost everything and own almost nothing, and the family has structured this distinction with the same care they've structured everything else, which is to say, generationally, deliberately, permanently. You attend a board meeting for the foundation, seated in the back, not because you're unwelcome, but because your seat has not yet been defined, and undefined seats go to the back. A woman introduces the quarterly giving report. $14 million distributed to 11 organizations, presented with the emotional temperature of a weather forecast. You realize you are watching a family discuss more money than most people will see in 40 lifetimes, and nobody in the room finds this remarkable. Because remarkable requires comparison, and this room has stopped comparing itself to anything outside itself. You will never own anything with your name on it here, not because anyone is unkind, because ownership was never on offer. You were offered access, comfort, provision, a life that looks, from every angle photographed for family newsletters, indistinguishable from wealth. But underneath the photograph, the structure is clear. You are provided for. You are not a shareholder in the thing you married into. You are a beneficiary of it, which is a different word with a very different center of gravity. Thursday, Thai place. You tell Keisha the word provision, and she says that sounds like a word lawyers invented so rich people don't have to say allowance. You laugh and you think, yes, exactly that. And you think about the Thai restaurant's ownership structure, which is simple. Keisha owns half the check, you own half the check, and nobody has ever needed a family office to determine the split. Tier 6, $600 million. There are homes on 4 continents, and you have visited 3 of them exactly once each. There's a staff, a large one, and they report to something called the family office, an entity with its own letterhead and its own hierarchy, not to you, despite the fact that you technically live in several of the houses they maintain. You discover you have a handler. Her name is Diane. Her job is managing your public appearances, which is a sentence you didn't know applied to you until Diane called to discuss your schedule for a gala you hadn't yet agreed to attend. She is not unkind. She is extremely competent. She refers to your image the way other people refer to a product line, something with positioning, something that requires quarterly review. To attend the gala, Diane has selected the dress. Diane has approved the photographer's request for a specific angle. Diane has briefed you on which board member's daughter recently went through a public divorce and should not be asked about it. You smile at the correct moments. You say the correct things. You realize, somewhere around the second course, that you have not had an unmanaged conversation in 11 days. The family doesn't discuss money at dinner. They discuss positioning, allocation, the optics of a recent acquisition. You've learned the vocabulary. You can follow the conversation now, mostly, though you notice you're never asked to contribute to it, only to understand it well enough not to embarrass anyone by looking confused. Thursday. Thai place, though this Thursday required 40 minutes of routing around a gala rehearsal and Diane's mild concern about your visibility at what she called an unbranded location. You tell Keisha about the handler. about the 4 continents, about the 11 unmanaged, conversation-free days. Keisha says, "Does Diane know you're here right now?" You say, "No." She says, "Good, keep it that way. This is the one thing that doesn't need managing." You laugh, and the pod CU arrives, and for 45 minutes there is no positioning, no allocation, no optics. Just curry, and a booth that wobbles, and the only unmanaged conversation you've had in almost 2 weeks. Tier 7, $2 billion. The family doesn't attend galas. They fund the foundations that host them. There's a difference, and you understand it now, the way you understand most things in this world, by watching the room reorganize itself around a name before the person carrying it has said a single word. Your signature is required on documents you don't fully understand, not because you're incapable of understanding them, because they're drafted by lawyers whose retainer is paid by the family, whose obligation is to the family, whose careful, precise language exists to protect an entity that predates you and will outlast you, an entity that currently includes you the way a bridge includes a support beam, necessary, structural, replaceable if the engineering ever requires it. You meet Whitfield again. Not the same Whitfield, a different one, from a different firm, but the same essential species of man. Thin glasses, careful handshake, a vocabulary built entirely around protecting principle. He explains a restructuring of the family trust that affects your provision in ways you don't fully grasp and he doesn't fully explain, because explaining fully was never the assignment. Compliance was the assignment. You sign where indicated, ... They're quotes a wing at a university. There's a policy institute that produces papers cited in congressional testimony. There's a family name that appears in contexts you didn't know families appeared in. Economic advisory boards, cultural preservation committees, a seat at tables where decisions are made that will outlive everyone currently seated at them. You are married into infrastructure now, not wealth. The distinction matters more than you expected it to. Thursday, Thai place. You tell Keisha about the wing, the policy institute, the congressional testimony. She says, "So basically you married a small government." You laugh, longer than the joke probably deserves, because it's the first true sentence anyone said about this family in months. The pad CU is the same temperature it's always been. The booth wobbles exactly the amount it has always wobbled. Nothing here requires a signature. Tier 8, $10 billion plus. The family's name is on a university building you've walked past 100 times without knowing you'd eventually marry into it. The name is also on a research institute, a concert hall, and a scholarship fund that has quietly educated more first-generation college students than most state programs combined. A fact the family mentions exactly once, at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right journalist, and never again. Because generational wealth doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't need to. You realize, somewhere in the 11th year, that the marriage was never entirely about you and your husband. It was, in part, a merger. 2 families, 2 sets of holdings, 2 sets of interests that aligned in ways that made the arrangement structurally sound, regardless of what happened between the 2 people at its center. You were, in the language nobody used but everyone understood, the asset that made the numbers work. Not the only reason, but a reason. A real one. A load-bearing one. This isn't said to you directly. It's said in the way the family lawyer, the 4th Whitfield-adjacent man in 11 years, discusses succession planning in front of you as though you're furniture that happens to be present. Not because he's rude, but because the conversation was never designed to require your input, only your continued existence within its structure. You think, sometimes, about Deborah and the lake house question, about Constance and the fork, about Diane and the 11 unmanaged days, about every family, every tier, every version of being evaluated, positioned, provisioned, and structurally included without ever once being asked who you actually are underneath the appropriate pieces and the correct smile and the signature on page 14. No family ever asked who you were. They asked what you could withstand. And you withstood all of it. Tier after tier, family after family. Because withstanding was the actual qualification, the real one, the one no prenup ever wrote down because writing it down would have made it too visible to deny. Thursday. Thai place on Division Street. Keisha is already there. She ordered for you. The pad see ew is on the table. The booth wobbles. Nobody here has ever asked what you could withstand. Nobody here has ever needed you to. Keisha just asked, 12 years ago, if you wanted extra garlic bread, and said nothing else, and required nothing else. And that turned out to be the entire application, the whole prenup, the only document in your life that was never drafted by a man named Whitfield, and never once needed correcting. You split the check. 8 families, 8 fortunes, 8 versions of yourself photographed at 8 different scales of wealth. And one $23 check split evenly every Thursday by the only person who was never marrying you for anything at all.